We will have to be ready to fight in cities, in space, in the cyber domain, in the Arctic, and on the high seas.
There was a speech by Mark Rutte from NATO in Munich. There he also said something like, the time is now, we have to prepare now. The US, I would say, is not actually retreating from NATO. It's not. US command in NATO is not going to leave, because these are the people that actually strategize and verbalize this type of strategies to the European allies.
How can you clamp down on propagandists? Well, according to the European Union, with sanctions. On the 15th of December, 12 people were handed sanctions for participating in pro-Kremlin foreign manipulation and interference operations.
This is exactly why this type of censorship is going on in the European Union, where different outlets, specifically from Russia, have been censored. And this is why they will have different strategies, from tweets to their speeches to contingency plans to censorship, all of it, for different groups within their society.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions.
They are trying to search for new avenues to create more faster developments and more equipment and weapons and armaments. Concept of dual use, so that civilian industries and so on, but also tech industries, not only develop for civilian use, but that it's also can be used for the military.
Attorney General Pam Bondi just shared this video that shows U.S. forces seizing an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela. This marks a major escalation in tensions with Venezuela as the U.S. military continues to build up its forces in the Caribbean.
I would say it's not only Venezuela, but of course Venezuela is the prime target right now in Latin America because of its oil reserves. Today, I think they are trying to implement a kind of siege around Venezuela, so that no oil tankers can leave or enter near the seas of Venezuela.
NATO's chief has urged the West to prepare for war like our grandparents endured. Mark Rutte warned that the UK and other allies are next in Russia's sights and said member states must rapidly boost defence spending. Speaking at a security conference in Berlin, Rutte said, "We are Russia's next target."
These Western elites are currently sensing that time is running out for the way they have managed, let's say, the global order and such in the last century. They are losing their status as the hegemon, as the leaders of the unipolar moment and so on. We sense that they are also losing access to resource flows that they previously had. In this concept, they are basically saying there is no real border between peace and war.
Hi everyone, my guest today is an up-and-coming intellectual with a brilliant analytical mind, Nel Bonilla. She's a researcher working towards her doctorate thesis focusing on topics like geopolitics, transatlantic networks, conflict, and migration. She publishes on Substack under the newsletter Word Lines, and I will put the link in the video description for her Substack. She has recently published a 3-part series called Weaponizing Time, which is a critical analysis of how Western powers, especially the United States and NATO, structure global military, economic, and strategic systems to maintain perpetual conflicts, wars, and control worldwide. These articles also argue that rather than retreating or declining, these powers are reconfiguring their system to adapt and preserve their dominance. Part 1 is called Elite Anxiety and the Fight for a Closing Window. Part 2 is called The Global Operating System on Western Power. And Part 3 is called The Steel Hard Casing of Imperial Deferral. Her work has also been published in various other journals. So welcome, Nel. Great to be talking to you. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
That's okay. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me. I know you must be very busy. So you recently published the final part, 3rd part. Or is there any part that's going to come out? It's only 3 parts?
Yes.
Oh, okay, yeah.
No, actually there will be more parts.
There will be more parts.
Probably three more.
3 more.
Yes.
Okay, that's good to know. So why did you name it Weaponizing Time?
Yes, I named it Weaponizing Time because it's about how the West, well, not the West as such, but rather the Western, let's call them power elites or functional elites, which means the elites that are specifically tasked, some of them democratically, to organize our societies, to manage them, to administer them, and so on. So that these Western elites are currently are sensing that time is running out for the way they have managed, let's say, the global order as such in the last century. So it's called weaponizing time because as they sense that their time is running out, in the sense that they are losing their status as the hegemon, as the leaders of the unipolar moment, and so on. And as they sense that they are also losing access to resource flows that they previously had, as all the other countries that are, let's call them non-Western or non-aligned, etc., that these have been developing sovereign, they have become more sovereign, more autonomous, and have been developing their living standards, technology, industrialization, etc., in an unprecedented speed, or a speed, let's say, that these Western elites wouldn't have acknowledged, or that they are starting to acknowledge, but they are not accepting it. So they are currently, and I'm not saying like they are a monolithic force, that they all think the same, but let's say there is a dynamic going on where they are trying to see how they can stop this development, to still be in their position of power, their status and role in the world, even ideologically. And that's why it's called weaponizing time, because then they are looking for ways, how can we do that? And let's say roughly what some of these planners and strategists and so on within these groups have developed as an idea how this could be stopped is exactly to use different plans, strategies that try to, weaponize time, in the sense, for example, I have one concept that I highlighted. It's called strategic ambiguity, which is about trying to create uncertainty, ambiguity for their so-called peer adversaries, or their enemies, so to speak. And they do it by, if they create uncertainty, then the other party has to constantly use their resources to prepare for whatever may come, even if it's financial, economic, or even so-called kinetic or military action. And this also means they are using the resource of time. So this is one reason why I called it weaponizing time. Because they even talk about it, let's say the Western elites talk about it, let's say the NATO, the transatlantic elites specifically. Very recently, I think there was a speech by Mark Rutte from NATO in Munich security conference, and there he also said something like, the time is now, we have to prepare now. And even NATO themselves, in their own papers that they have developed in the last years, one of which I quote in part 3 in the essay, they also talk about this concept of the time is now, we need to prepare now. And the interesting thing then also is that, which I will actually develop in the coming essays, the following essays, but which I started here. So also that they have this idea of, not this, yes, it's an idea. Like they are creating institutions that are called future, foresight, or transformation, whatever institutions, divisions, commands, all over NATO countries, within NATO itself, within the US military, British, French, German, etc. And the idea is, they call them future or transformation or foresight. So they are thinking, okay, we need to prepare for the future, but specifically for future warfare. So there's also this question of time. but not. It's definitely not in the sense that they are saying, "Oh, let's analyze what has happened, and then let's look how we can, let's say, accept the changing world." No, it's about, as I said, seeing how they can still maintain their position. And the only way they see they can maintain their position in the world is exactly through, on the one hand, yes, military, so-called kinetic actions, but on the other hand, also, of course, financial warfare, cognitive, and so on. So that's why it's called weaponizing time.
That's a great description, explanation. That term strategic ambiguity, I think you've mentioned it in your second article. I think you also talk about if a country aligns itself with the West and US unconditionally, it will not face any uncertainty. But the country that doesn't align, it does face ambiguity, whether it's going to be attacked or not, like Venezuela or Iran, I guess. So,
Yes.
so when you talk about West and US, is there any country in West or in European Union that doesn't fit this, let's say, military, how can you put it politely, that doesn't fall into this military propaganda, that wants peace?
Well, I would say rather than countries as such, I mean, maybe it could be, for example, Slovakia, Fico or Fico, I think it's pronounced, could be an example. Many would say that Hungary's Orban fits into the description there. I'm not exactly sure because he does support some actions, military initiatives. Not the one concerning Russia, but for example concerning Israel. But I wouldn't say it's like we shouldn't see it like countrywide, like it's the whole population and the whole elites of one country that don't fit or fit. It's rather, or this description, rather it's that this is the tragedy maybe. It's that in whichever country you look at of the European Union, there will be this effort to align with the US, with their goals. And it's there are different, but still there are different groups. So let's say Germany, yes. Germany, the current CDU, SPD, or CDU as a Christian Democratic Union, and SPD Social Democratic Party coalition, they apparently in the rhetoric they use, they say, no, we are trying to be independent, Pax Americana isn't anymore in Europe, we need to be more need to rely on ourselves, specifically militarily. But it's not the only faction of elites within Germany. There are also even not political elites. There are other groups that say, no, we need to propose, support a peace process in Russia, Ukraine. We need to not cut ourselves off from China, from Russia, and rather cooperate with everyone. So there are different factions, and even the population itself, like the citizens, even there are people that say no, we don't want war, or others that say yes, we want it, but or others that say we do want to have economic relations with Russia or China, and others that don't. So it's not that a whole country wants this or that. It's rather that the dynamics, like the dynamic itself that is emerging, points to a certain direction. And in this moment in time, I would say for the European Union, unfortunately, most structural forces, there are just too many, you could say, elites from the industrial to the political to the legislative, etc., that are going into this path of obeying, one could say, the US demands. Now here comes the interesting part. Everything is interesting, but I mean, here comes the paradox situation. Now with the national security strategy of this year, of course, the Trump administration basically has said publicly something like, "Oh, we will set ourselves apart from Europe, from the European Union, but we also see they have some problems, and hopefully they can manage to solve them." And so one could say, "Oh, okay, but isn't the US leaving then the European Union, the European countries? So why are you saying that they are following the orders of the US?" The thing is, we need to understand the different layers of these processes. It's not only the rhetorical, the public level of these document strategies that are spread all over the media. It's not only and necessarily not those statements by the different politicians. These are mostly, I would say, justifications for on the one hand, the citizens themselves of the various countries that are affected, and on the other hand, they are also like ideological justifications for these elites themselves, so that they can say, okay, we are carrying out these or that policies because, for example, we want to preserve, as I mentioned in these essays, the garden versus the jungle. We need to keep the jungle out and protect the garden, and so this is the public level, but then there's also the, of course, legislative level, and then there's also the level of execution, implementation. So in essay number 3, I look at the, you could say, implementation level, and there we can see that there are actually right now going on, but also some in the last 5 years or so, and going on processes of really constructing infrastructure, but also software and so on for preparations of warfare, whether it be a high intensity conflict or a low intensity one. But they are doing exactly that. They have NATO bases, for example, inside Germany, but not only, and even so-called commands, multi-domain operation commands. And they are not retreating from there. First of all, within NATO, most command positions are taken by the US military establishment. I think there's only one French general that has a command position. All the others are from the US military. Then on the other hand, when we talk about these new types of military bases within, for example, Germany, they are not retreating from them, doing the opposite right now. They are planning on extending the let's say importing more commanders generals from the US military to Germany, but also to other countries. So this is the level of the execution implementation. And then there's the legislative level, which is, for example, there will be passed an act in the US Congress called National Defense Authorization Act, I think it is. This is about, okay, how much money will be used for the different implementation steps, and also how many military equipment will be bought, in what way, and so on and so forth. And the NSS, the National Security Strategy, is, well, the public-facing document that might or might not be enacted. It rather adapts to the other levels that are much more important, and which we need to look at if we want to say, okay, does this or that country really try to find its own way or not, or is it voluntarily or not? It could also be that the leaders themselves might not want to be part of these structures, these military network structures, but they fear isolation, they fear being maybe economically or financially isolated if they refuse. So the thing is, we cannot know which leaders or political elites are really either ideologically persuaded that this is the way, or might even know a bit more, are more cynical, or those that just are going with the flow, so to speak.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the latest United States national security document. You've touched upon that because they seem to be backing off from, let's say, directly antagonizing China, because they've recently told Japan to tone it down. There was a call between Trump and the Japanese Prime Minister. And so they seem to be backing off from China as well. At least they don't see it as a military threat. I mean, they don't overtly say it as a military threat. I know they consider it as a military threat, but they say that it's now an economic threat. But they seem to be backing off from European Union and NATO as well. Although United States still, I think, pays around 16% of NATO's budget, which is massive. It didn't say that it's not going to pay it. It just wants the other European Union countries to share more of a burden. It tells me that United States is probably changing its direction and focus from Europe to, like they mentioned, to Latin America. Is that how you see it as well?
No.
No?
I mean, yes and no. Again, it's there are different levels, and we need to understand why, on which levels they are retreating. Yes, on which levels are they retreating and why? So, in the case of China and Russia, they indeed, not with clear words, are saying these are our threats, like they did in the last two, I think, national security strategies. But they are saying it like covertly. They say, oh, within Europe, there can't be a dominant nation.
Correct.
The only dominant nation they are talking about is Russia. The same for the Indo-Pacific. They say there can't be no dominant nation except for, I mean, they don't say it, but it's implied, China. So in which level, or on which level are they actually retreating, apart from the rhetorical, which I think is rather for the purposes of what or how their new strategy is laid out? On the level of, yes, one could say they are indeed having problems, industrial material problems, problems with recruits and so on. And they want we can call them proxies, we can call them allies. They want them, yes, to shoulder the burden. And this means, on the one hand, yeah, okay, to develop their own armaments, weapons, but really not. They actually want their allies to buy US American weapons, for example, on the one hand. On the other hand, they also want the different allies to recruit more and more people as soldiers and whatever else there is needed. That's why there's so much talk about right now in various European Union countries about resilience and the whole of nation approach. Because this is what this burden sharing means. It does not mean that then the European Union or different countries in Southeast Asia and Asia are now, so to speak, free and can do what they want, whatever they want. No. They are still within this architecture, within this strategy of having to prepare for a larger scale conflict as well as for lower scale conflicts. Now, in the case of Latin America, that's definitely, I would say, here we also need to think about, again, different levels. So if they want to retreat, no, not retreat, if they want or are anticipating and preparing for a large-scale conflict in these other regions of the world, Eurasia and Asia specifically, these are regions of the world where they would have had their resources in terms of, for example, rare earth minerals, oil and other things that they actually need, even industrial production-wise and so on. So if a large-scale conflict or other mid-scale conflict or what would happen, then this would mean that the economic weapon that the adversaries could use could be really effective. So they need also to decouple. And for that, they need another region, and there's just another one would be, Latin America. They need another region where they can source the different materials, resources they need for this decoupling, economic decoupling. So the idea that they say, well, now we want to again implement the Monroe Doctrine, and it's our sphere of influence, and so on and so forth. This does mean, and I mean there is the danger. It's currently there and has been in the last years, but now it will be probably more so. The danger for many Latin American countries to be yes, in military crosshairs, although I wouldn't say that the plan is invading, for example, Venezuela, but rather it's about doing this hybrid warfare on the one hand, and siege, economic siege. So everything that they can do to destabilize these governments as much as possible, not necessarily invasion. Maybe, yes, some quick military attacks like they did in Iran, but not invasion as such. And that's what they want to do for all the Latin American countries, I guess, that are not exactly 100% aligned with the current Trump administration. So, and for many of these other countries, they are not currently doing anything more than tariffs and what I would call this cognitive warfare, where they are trying to create chaos. Well, they try chaos and civil unrest and so on and so forth. These are the plans for Latin America. And so they want to have Latin America as a backyard, but a backyard of the materials and resources they will need if they actually do collide with these other so-called peers, as they call them. Yes.
Right. So they're shifting their attention to Latin America mainly to, let's say, extract or control resources in case in future they have to collide with China or Russia. So NATO is busy fighting Russia in Ukraine right now. So what consequences do you see would it have on this war with Russia when US starts to intervene less and less in NATO policy going forward after its new security document? Do you see any change in NATO's attitude towards Russia?
Yeah, it's again a yes and a no. So the US, I would say, is not actually retreating from NATO. It's not. It's still within NATO. What it's trying to do is, again, this burden sharing concept with the European allies. Now, it is not, this is also why, for example, the Trump administration also scolded in a way the Japanese government. It's the same. And this is what I try to explain in my second part specifically. They have this new strategy where they try to create a new type of warfare that's more data-centric, more so-called decision-centric, which means it can be everywhere and it can be controlled and observed from everywhere. So Europe or the European allies are currently in the process of building this type of these capabilities up so that they can actually be part and fulfill their functions in the so-called multi-domain operations strategy or doctrine. So then the reason why the US is saying like, oh, we need strategic stability with Russia is true in the sense that they need the stability to build up these capabilities. And they have a timeline for 2029, 2013. They had previously set up this timeline for 2027. But they were not as fast as they thought, so they pushed it back to 2029 or 2030. So that is why they are saying, okay, now we need. It's not the only reason. The other reason is also that Russia is indeed advancing within Ukraine. But I would say even that the main reason is this: they need time to build up capabilities, to recruit more soldiers, to do all of this. And this also means that NATO or the US command in NATO is not going to leave, because these are the people that actually strategize and verbalize this type of strategies to the European allies. So at least in that sense, they are not retreating, and the ceasefires and ideas of such are not about really trying to, again, have an economic diplomatic relation with Russia. It's more about just saying, okay, we need to pause, and we don't need any escalation that could lead to any greater kinetic action right now in the coming 5 years. So that's the reason, and also for the so-called Indo-Pacific, that's the reason why they are doing or why they are apparently saying, no, tone it down, and, oh, we will retreat. Because they are building all of this up. Everything, the burden sharing is just that. It's another word for we are building up the infrastructure, the software, the, how do you say, human resources for this type of warfare. And again, I'm not saying that they are really trying to start World War III or something like that. It's rather that they are preparing for such a scenario. But in the meantime, and they are trying to destabilize Russia and China through targeting different countries that are allied with them and destabilizing them. So actually targeting different countries in Latin America also serves that purpose additionally. So in Latin America, for example, China has been has had a greater presence industrially, infrastructurally, sorry, and they are trying to scale that back because this will also destabilize a little China or Russia. So I would say it's the idea that they are turning their back from Europe, that they are trying to seek peace or ceasefire and so on, is not, at least it's not what it seems on the surface. There are deeper layers to it.
So basically, you think this is just a temporary lull in the United States policy. Once they've got enough resources, they will again go into the front lines. And then, okay. So if I have to sum up part one of your Weaponizing Time series, I can say that you mentioned that the psychology of European leaders and elites is to basically, they realize that their time of dominance is coming to an end, but they still want to maintain control. And they are trying to come up with ways to have, let's say, perpetual wars in different zones so that they can create chaos and still control other regions' resources, I guess. So in part two, you talk about, and you've touched on that, strategic ambiguity, multi-domain operation, and mosaic warfare as synergistic doctrines. So is this, and you also sort of refer to Eisenhower and Reagan's, sort of theology, where they I think, implemented strategic ambiguity over there, where you mentioned that if a country aligns itself with the United States or Western elites unconditionally, it doesn't really have to worry about any wars. But if it doesn't, that it will always be under uncertain condition whether a war is coming to it or not. And we see that happening in real time right now in Venezuela and in Iran as well. So do you see, based on your analysis, another war happening between Israel, Iran, Israel, America, and Iran, and America and Venezuela?
Well, I would say, I mean, for specifically American Venezuela, I would say that it already is a type of war, but it's a hybrid war. So the idea, and I would say it's not only Venezuela, but of course Venezuela is the prime target right now in Latin America because of its oil reserves, mostly. And so it already kind of is a war, not in the traditional sense. And this is also another point I'm making in my essays, that these doctrines of multi-domain operations and the, let's say, the strategy behind it through the so-called Army Unified Network plan basically make classic war obsolete. You don't need, or in this reading, you don't need to formally declare war. You just, because they within this concept, they are basically saying there is no real border between peace and war. It's all a gray zone. So that's why I would say that they are actually already within a type of warfare with Venezuela, and it's probably maybe geared towards, rather than military action. For example, right today, I think they are trying to implement a kind of siege around Venezuela so that no oil tankers can leave or enter near the seas of Venezuela. So it's already happening, but with different instruments, and that's what this multi-domain operations doctrine is about. Multi-domain means that it means not only the military spheres of land, sea, air, but it also means so-called cyberspace, aerospace, and also, even though it's not often spelled out like the cognitive domain, financial, economic domain. So it's already happening, and it's kind of direct, I would even say, just from the tweets, unfortunately, that Trump writes and posts and so on. And so that's already happening. In the case of Iran, Israel, and America, or the US, I would say that they haven't, or let's say here, I'm not sure, but I would also say they will not just let it slide, or let someone that is still sovereign and autonomous and so on developing their own technology and just be. That's not realistic, not in their plans. And what I would also like to add, it's not that they want to specifically control all the whole world. It's just that they want to stop this dynamic, this logic of that now they are or will become an equal among equals. That's what they are trying to stop. So for that, they need to do or engage in this hybrid warfare with all of these allies of China and Russia and Iran, and also target them specifically as well through different means. And the other thing is that so it's on the one hand about stopping or even destroying these developments that they already had. And on the other hand, it's not that if one country says, "Oh, I will do whatever you want," U.S. government, that they won't have any problems. That's also not the case, unfortunately. So it doesn't mean that then they will be targeted with hybrid warfare. No, that's not the point. But since the U.S. is trying to decouple from Russia, from China, they will need to get their resources elsewhere. So their allies will be those that will but will be used to prop up, to strengthen the U.S. economy or military aims or whatever. So that's, for example, why there's also this framework of Pearl, where the NATO countries of the European Union are buying US American weapons. And I mean, it's why would they even do this? Well, so I would say, and what I forgot to say, I mean, why is all of this? Why are all of these plans of militarization and so on so dangerous? I mean, they are dangerous, but I also want to say that there is also the factor of the citizens themselves. So, in order for the U.S. to have economic, military control or influence over its allies, this also means that things like social spending, healthcare, education, and all of these things will need to be scaled back dramatically. So, in essence, and that's a term I also use in one of my essays, is that the US is cannibalizing on its allies. Slowly, not in a very fast way, but it's happening. And so to say that, well, if you do what the U.S. government wants or its elites, you will have no problem. It's not exactly what I wanted to say. At the end of the day, it's also not a shield against the consequences. However, and that's where all these questions come from. Okay, but why are the, for example, Europeans then allowing this to happen? Why are they not protesting? It's because, or this is a theory I have. It's because these elites, these functional elites, the transatlantic specifically, are already so entwined with the US elites that they don't see themselves, or many of them, not all, but many of them don't see themselves as part of their countries, or their interests don't lie with their citizens. They lie with the mission, with the aim of the US, but not only the US. This is also something I try to explain in the third part. Their alliances or their aims also are based on a shared ideological framework that the US has, and that also the European political but also industrial elite shares of supremacy, and that they need to keep having this supremacy. And for that, they will use their own citizens as whatever cannon fodder or labor resources that are all geared towards these same ends.
So I'm guessing when you say they don't really see themselves as part of their own citizens, meaning they have some due loyalty and they already have means and resources to move away from the country of their birth in case something bad happens, I guess. Right, right. That's scary actually, because people will use their own citizens for their own gain. So, and obviously, all these European Union countries are democratic countries, so people have voted for them. So, meaning people, let's say, like their leaders. So, but you are making a distinction between the ruling party or the rulers, elites, and also between the citizens, people who vote. So, in your opinion, the citizens don't really want war. It's the elites who want wars so that they can maintain their own wealth and control as well.
Yeah, and I mean it's of course a two-way street, but if we look at the, how do you say, the popularity of the different European Union leaders in their countries, it's mostly below 50, below 40%, even below 30%. So they are not really liked or wanted within the different populations, citizenry. So, but why didn't they, or why did they even elect them? So that's also a good question. And I would say many of these European political leaders weren't actually elected with a great majority, but rather with a minimal, absolutely minimal majority, or through other means. And whether it was wholly democratic, I'm not sure in every case. So there is also, I mean, something going on. Let's say it like this. So the European elites, functional elites, are also aware that they need to influence their populations for these different aims of preparing for whatever type of warfare. And for that, they need to, yes, manipulate them. So on the one hand, and also here serves this U.S. And national security strategy and Trump's comments and so on, and from these other U.S. Administration members, that they are saying we are leaving Europe, and at the same time, the European leaders are saying, "Oh, Russia is the greatest threat to us. We need to, we will have again scenarios in World War II and all of that." All of these, I'm not saying that none of these elites might believe in these words they are saying, but regardless of this, this type of narratives that they are constructing are geared towards influencing the population and, yes, accepting the cuts to social spending, to health and education, and accept that all of this will be used for the military and that they themselves will need to undergo training and recruitment and all of that. So now, is it working? Is the other question. I would say that it's on a case-by-case basis in the different countries. And the other thing that I see here as a development that is even mentioned in the national security strategy itself is that within the European Union, it's going, one could say, ideologically to the right in the sense of fomenting nationalism, maybe xenophobia. So, and why? Why is that? And even the national security strategy, with its talk about the erasure of civilization, European civilization, and there needs to be renovation, but in the political leadership, all of this is geared toward again the same end. If you want to prepare your population, your citizens for warfare, you will need to stoke the flames of nationalism, but in a us against them, evil versus good type of framework. So this is what is happening. The question is whether it will be successful. Another thing or another factor we can observe within this is also that the European Union is or a specific part of it around Kaja Kallas is sanctioning citizens of non-EU countries, but also of European Union countries that are active in the media sphere, alternative media sphere. And this is also another part of this strategy, I would say, because in this case, it's actively targeting the different experts and journalists and so on in a way to say, if you don't stop or censor yourselves in a way, if you don't stop, then something like this will happen to you. A sanction on having basically no rights and no way to work and live or even travel through the European Union. And so this is another part of the strategy. They are trying to also make the media space smaller and smaller, so there only is basically one opinion of we need to prepare for war. So these are different tools that they are using to manipulate their citizens. Now the question will they be successful? Are they currently being successful? I mean, in some countries there are not so many protests and so on right now, and maybe one could say they are at least not, how do you say it? There's not so much resistance, at least right now. But I think they are also prepared for that, because if we look, for example, at Germany again, because that's the case example I use in my essays. Within Germany, there's a plan called Operationsplan Deutschland, or Operation, how do you say it? Operation Plan of Germany, or something like that, within this plan, it's not only about building infrastructure so that NATO military and equipment can go through Germany, and actually from the US. It's explicit that it's about that transfer from the US through Europe, through Germany to the so-called Eastern flank. That's also made explicit in different NATO documents. But even if you look at conferences and so on, it's all about preparing for the Eastern flank. Well, there's this plan that says, okay, Germany will be this logistical hub. But it's not only about Germany being a logistical hub. It's also about the different military structures within Germany preparing for this new type of warfare. And also a segment, I don't remember if it's a segment of the military per se, but I think it's the home defense security or something division within Germany will be tasked to secure and defend the infrastructure. But not only that, also in a way, it's a force that is supposed to be not targeting, but stopping any civilian protests. So they are also preparing for these scenarios. And in a way, I must say I forgot the question. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
What was the question?
Yeah, no, that's okay. I was just gonna basically what I was saying was the citizens have elected these leaders. So and I was
That's
going
what
to
the
talk
question
about the cuts in social spending, healthcare, education, infrastructure, all that. But I'll come to that later because that's part of. I think you sort of touch upon that in part 3 of your article. So I have that question later for you. But regarding part 2, you also talk about part 2 of your article, or article number 2. You also talk about the hypocrisy of United States. You cite an article from, I think, Small Wars Journal, in which the article says that United States is hamstrung by its adherence to rules, whereas its enemies are not. But we have proof that United States and its allies have carried out dirty tactics and war crimes. We have proof that CIA engaged in assassinations and coups in different countries. We have whistleblowers. We have Edward Snowden and Julian Assange who exposed all these dirty and illegal tactics. So my question to you was going to be: are these leaders really dumb that in this age of digital information, they think that people don't really know about this hypocrisy?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that's a interesting question. So I would say they actually do, or are absolutely aware that citizens in this day and age have more access to more information. This is exactly why this type of censorship is going on in the European Union, where different outlets, specifically from Russia, have been censored. You cannot access them so easily or at all from European Union countries. So yes, they are aware of this, but at the same time, I mean, this is the question, or one of the questions. I think in a way, some of these elites really have this idea that they indeed what they are doing, and this is what they are doing is correct, right? And they are on the side of the good side of history, so to speak, and they really believe in it, which means that they are not capable, or what they are doing is always justified, even if it breaks the rules. It's a justified failure, breaking of the rules. On the other hand, for the citizens, I mean, I think there are many that also have this worldview of we are the force of good and the other ones are the forces of evil. I think it exists, which doesn't mean that all of the people within these countries think like that. Not at all. It is exactly because of this that there are censorship, there are sanctions, there is this preparation for looking at how they can contain protests and demonstrations and so on. There is this awareness. The other things, even though I'm not saying all of these transatlantic elites are absolutely persuaded by their ideology, they at least do share this framework that one could say the dualistic framework, that there's always good and evil, and they are good and the rest are evil. And this is exactly why they are even preparing the way they are doing it through multi-domain operations, through strategic ambiguity, through the unified network plan, mosaic warfare, all of it. This is the reason why they're preparing for it, because one of the reasons, because they think, well, we are the force of good, the superior force in the world, and we need to prevail, of course. And that's what I also said. It's also a kind of justification, psychologically speaking. If they amass so much power, resources, status, and so on, they need to somehow justify it to themselves and to the citizens too. How do you say it? Teach the citizens that this is the way to view the world. So this is, as I said, it's more like a multi-layered process, because a society, a country, or a society within a country always has different groups, even within the elites themselves. So, and then this is why they will have different strategies, from tweets to their speeches to contingency plans to censorship, all of it, for different groups within their societies.
Yeah, I think this is why Kaja Kallas, the vice president of European Commission, a couple of months ago said that she, Putin, Iran, and Kim, they don't follow the rule-based system of West and United States. So that's probably her way of saying that they are at odds with what West and United States think. But you also mentioned in your second article that they don't want a resolution, they want perpetual conflicts and wars. And they will have to mask the domestic decline. And this is where part 3 is very important, or third article is very important, because your third article talks about the physical and institutional infrastructure that they would have to build that would bind NATO, United States, and the European military industrial cooperation. And you give an example of Manfred Weber, president of the European People's Party, and who said that Europeans will have to spend 6.4 trillion euros in the next 10 years on military, and America would match that. So European Union has 27 member countries, population of 450 million people. So this comes out to be 14,000, let's say 400 euros per person over the next 10 years. European Union's total GDP is 17 trillion euros. So if they are spending 640 billion every year to get to 6.4 trillion in 10 years, this makes it around 3.8% of the total GDP. This is really high. America spends 3%, so European Union is spending 3.8% of its total GDP annually, or it's going to spend. So this is where I get confused. Where are they going to get this money from? Because their GDP, or their share of GDP of the global GDP, is going down year after year. So it is declining. China's share is going up. There are a couple of other countries whose share of GDP is going up compared to European Union. Where are they going to get all that money from? And also, do citizens not object, like you've already mentioned it, why they don't object, or if they object, they are censored. But yeah, this is a massive amount of money that they would have to spend.
Yes, that's a very good question. Well, on the one hand, one of the, I think, crucial steps they are trying to take in order to somewhere get the money from anywhere, somewhere, is indeed to radically cut social services, health and education. Anything that is not related to military means is being cut down, or is going to be cut down and reduced. And on the other hand, they are also, I think there is a clause where they are allowed to go into debt for this military spending. So this is another avenue on how they are trying to get this money from somewhere. But you're absolutely right. It's a enormous amount of money, and the efforts they're trying to make. I mean, I'm not sure, but I would say it's like an aim they have, and the question is whether they, like with all of these figures and numbers that they have in the different plans, whether it's of sums of money or of the number of I don't know, tanks or what have you, that they want to buy or spend, etc. It's all an aim, a projection. It's not necessarily that they will actually get there, but they will try. So, and again, I think the main avenue will be on the one hand to create debt, and on the other hand to cut social spending as much as possible. I'm not sure if there are probably other ways, but I must say I'm not a financial expert, so I don't want to speculate too much. But it's definitely a way that they are trying to, yes, look in these types of developments that they are currently doing. And this is another part that I'm going to look at, but haven't. Going to look at for another essay. Exactly this, that there are actually these type of 10-year or 50-year, 15-year plans where they are trying to say, okay, we need, for example, this amount of money, but not only. It's more about we need these changes, developments in the military command structure, in the equipment, armament, weapons, and they are set up for 10, 15 years. But again, let's say the reality is that there's always the legislative step they will need to take, and it's here where industry and the politicians themselves need to, how do you say it, need to discuss which types or which parts of these plans are actually going to be implemented for real and which aren't. So if we look at all of these doctrines and strategies, it doesn't mean that they will be materialized exactly as they are written down, but there is an attempt to. Now, will it work? I mean, what even does it mean, will it work? If it works for these transatlantic elites, this would mean that, because this is their aim, to halt, to stop, or even destroy the development of countries like China specifically, so that to get them to their level or below. So that's the aim. Now, will they succeed? Will they succeed in any of these steps, whether it be these 10-year plans, whether it's the 1-year plans they have when they pass their acts and financial plans? That's another question. But they are trying and already implementing some of these steps. That's a reality.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see first how they raise funds, and if they manage to raise funds, what are they going to build? And like you mentioned, even if they manage to build or acquire weapons, are they going to be successful or not? That's that's a tough question to answer right now. But then you also talk about who is going to profit from all this in your third article, and you give an example of a company called Rheinmetall, who has secured some government or military contracts to the tune of 260 million euros till 2029. And you also talk about the connectivity of corporations and industrial integration with NATO and European military. So, and I think we are already seeing a lot of it during the Palestinian genocide, where Microsoft, Google, Palantir, and other corporations are coming together, helping Israel and United States. I think so. That's going to become a default strategy going forward in every conflict or every war. That all these tech companies are going to work for the elites or for the military, I guess, and trying to give them as many resources as possible to wage war or to wage conflicts. So I mean, the way I see it is, I see two tech ecosystems forming right now. On one side, obviously, Google, Microsoft, Palantir, and other corporations in the West. On the other side, you've got Chinese tech infrastructure, which is completely separate. So I see both of these competing in future, I guess. Is that how you see it as well?
Yes, I mean, what I would add, or let's say it like this. So actually what is happening is that exactly because the political, the military elites or ruling strata, or however one wants to call them, are seeing that they have been quite slow in the technological development, quite slow with creating mass in weapons and so on, that they are trying to search for new avenues to create more faster developments and more equipment and weapons and armaments. So what's also a development within these plans and procurement plans and strategies is this concept of dual use, so that civilian industries and so on, but also tech industries, not only develop for civilian use, but that it's also can be used for the military. Now, the question is if these are two separate affairs, let's say Chinese technology and then these other Western companies, I would say yes, in the sense that even before these developments, Chinese companies and tech companies had their own ecosystem, one could say. They had this type of structure before. The difference is that these Western infrastructures, on the other hand, tech infrastructures, are more global, and they will be more, one could say, supported now by the different governments from NATO countries, from the European Union, exactly because these governments are seeing or have observed or came to the conclusion that the way that they planned and planned before China and Russia were able to compete in technological and military technological terms, that they now need to speed up to catch up and even be even surpass their development, or that's the aim they have. And for this, they do have not only in the European Union, also the US government themselves, they are developing and passing different legislative steps so that for example, in the case of the US Department of War or Defense, they have this new concept of warfighting acquisition system, which again is about speedy development. And even when the companies specifically develop their systems, it's not about testing them. I mean, they will test them, but it's not about getting them perfectly operational, only good enough. They are supposed to be only 85% ready before they can be actually used and tested and everything. So they are really locking in, or really trying to create and implement these different legislative and financial instruments into the different countries' financial structures, so that they can indeed really deliver and with these or really aim for the targets they have set themselves in these different plans and strategies that they have been developing in the last 10 years. So, but I would say, I mean, one could say they are competing with China, definitely. But yes, they are also separate, and they will have separate aims. I'm not familiar exactly. I would say maybe China has also many civilian or only civilian tech developments, but the West or the Western countries are currently trying to harness civilian companies specifically for military
That's
aims.
correct. And
So
we
maybe
see that right now in the war against Palestinians, I guess. All these tech companies are giving data information to Israel and United States. So, and you may not know the answer to this, but I would still ask, do you know European private equity, are they getting involved in weapons manufacturing as well?
that's a good question. And yes, you're right. Since I'm not a finance expert, I mean, I try to read through all of these things to get a big picture. But no, I cannot
That's okay,
answer
because
this now.
it's such a big topic, and you think through, and sometimes the question just pop up in your mind. So, and
That's okay.
in again in your third article, you say that there's a document, NATO's Strategic Foresight Analysis 2023. So that document, it explicitly discard any scenario involving peace and cooperation. It just wants war, war, war. And the reasons you've probably already given, that elites or the rulers want to maintain their hegemony and want to profit as much as they can. But do these documents go out to public also? And do you know if the public read these documents?
So, I mean, the interesting thing is that these documents are freely available. Anybody can read them. So they are published, but they are not public or not publicized. So, in effect, this is exactly why I write these types of essays, because
Right.
they are not publicized. So they publish them, and but I don't think they think that anybody would read them, or if they read them, what can they do, or would come to any conclusion that now we can do anything to stop these developments. So these types of documents are, I would say, specifically for security experts and military experts, and not all. What is interesting, there are also, of course, those that are not publicly available at all, that are not published and are classified. I mean, if one looks at these different documents on the different NATO or US military or other military websites, sometimes you will find documents like these that have a stamp on them that says this is not classified, because there's actually a part of it that is classified. But in this case, this is information where they say, well, if someone reads it, it's not so dangerous or important, we can publish it and make it freely available for all our NATO or allies that are interested. So this is what I think is happening with why these documents are even available at all. Now, on the other hand, this strategic foresight document, it talks about, or it discards specifically the model of cooperation, of peace, and all of it, which on the one hand is logical because NATO, even if they say they are for defense, are not exactly for defense. So of course they would, in a logic of profit and material, want to keep a war going in some way, low intensity, hybrid, or whatever. Or even they might want to prepare for a more large scale war, because even this helps them keep their different industries, their different positions going and alive. So in this way, this makes is one of the reasons, I guess, why they discard all the scenarios that are about peace and cooperation, coordination, stability. And in effect, they say the world is currently in a low intensity competition zone and will arrive at a major conflict sometime in the future, and that's why we need to prepare. And it's just so, I mean, if one reads it carefully, it's again just a reflection of this shared framework, the shared worldview that some of these Western or transatlantic elites have. We are the good part and the others are the jungle, and we need to protect ourselves from the jungle. And they, not even that, it's not only that, it's also that they then basically are saying, because of this, we cannot even speak or talk or cooperate. There's no point if the other side is the evil part, so to speak. And I mean, I also linked to a video of the strategic foresight division of NATO, which
That is maniacal. I thought that was AI, or that was a fake video. It is AI, but it is a genuine video, official video.
Yes.
I don't know who approved that, but it was positive to see all the comments were saying that the video is crap and we should not be waging war like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's interesting, isn't it? Because before I published the essay, there was no comment at all. I don't know, maybe 10 people saw the video at all. And after I published the essay, there are now comments and so on. I mean, I don't know even if it serves any purpose at all, but at least some people have seen and are aware that NATO has these types of ideas, plans, and is indeed working towards preparing for these scenarios. Whether they will then materialize or not is another question, but that they are doing it, they are.
Yeah, so they are American startups working on AI warfare, which is sad because the world needs more infrastructure, more, I think, medical products, products that can assist, people who are ill, sick, or cure people, not, weapons of war, I guess. But if you look at Europe's history, Europe has always been at war within itself and with the outside world as well. And on the other side, when you look at China has, 5,000-year-old civilization and history. And in that 5,000-year civilization, it has only attacked a country once outside of its boundary. That was Vietnam for 2 weeks. It has never attacked anybody. It has, to my knowledge, I guess, it has always grown through trade. And that's what it is trying to do itself right now as well. And trying to focus on itself to improve itself. But Europe has always been at war. NATO has been at war. The Yugoslavia genocide or massacre. Then, before that, Brits had their own imperial colonialism everywhere, spread everywhere, Asia, Africa. So I think it's in their psyche or mentality to be at war all the time. They can't really sit peacefully, I guess. That's my analysis. And economically, they are going down and down and down. They're not producing much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So here, I would say, so historically, it's not that, or I would say, it's not that, again, not the whole of Europe, so all of its population is a friend of these wars, or even proud of them or any, no. So it's more like, and this is another idea I will work on. I would say it's more like there is or there has in the history of Europe, with one could even go back to medieval times, even maybe before that a little. There was a development of a worldview, a framework, orientation framework that was about this dualism between good, evil, water, fire, war, peace, human nature, etc. Once there are theorists that say it came or it developed out of monotheism, or the belief in one God, and I mean, because the belief in one God says, okay, there is this one entity that is powerful, good, all good, and so on, and this means that there's also the contrary, and there's the spirit in the body, and so on. So these types of frameworks develop, but that's not exactly the problem. The problem is when these types of frameworks are used as a function by specific groups. So as one could say, as capitalism developed in Europe, because it hasn't always been capitalist, and it before capitalist development, it also had structures or societal structures that were a little bit more communal, even that, and even in their beliefs. So as this developed, it was let's say the rulers or the ruling strata in these different historical periods used this type of thinking, this very about dichotomies and dualisms and so on, used this type of thinking as a tool, one could say, of power, in a sense that it allows them to justify their domination over other people, as well as justify to themselves that they can do this. And this developed more and more, and one could say much more about it. But even, or maybe I might add that, for example, there is a book called Caliban and the Witch by, I think, a philosopher, Federici, she's called. And there she talks exactly about kind of this topic, that on the one hand, in Europe, before colonization, there was this period of burning witches, which was exactly about trying to destroy these more communal parts of the European populations in order to foment capitalism or capitalist development and societal structures. On the other hand, and a bit later, there was this colonization of the Americas, where they did something similar. They encountered these other peoples, indigenous peoples, and instead of trying to coexist, live with them, or anything like that, they saw them wholly as the other, as someone or something to be conquered, to be used, and they needed to justify themselves that they have a mandate of heaven, of God, to do this atrocious things and processes. So I would say that in these different historical stages is where the development of this framework, specifically of the European elite, came about, and has entrenched itself, or rather, I would even say that today it is re-emerging, because they are in a kind of state of anxiety and panic, that they cannot imagine themselves as an equal. They cannot. So if they cannot imagine themselves as an equal, they need to radicalize themselves and to carry out different acts, plans, and so on that might eventually lead, and is already, of course, leading to the loss of life and so on. So in this sense, I would say, but it's not hopeless, because again, it's not that all of Europe has this type of thinking. Even one could say, not that I have the solution, but if one accepts the theory then what is needed is that people are aware that this is the way the elite mindset works. And instead they would need to foment and strengthen their awareness of this and rather create structures, have in mind rather these ideas of commonality, of peace, of cooperation, coordination, and then protest, demonstrate, etc. But that would not be all. On the other hand, and here's where, for example, China, Russia, and all other non-aligned BRICS, etc. countries come in, is that they should, or they, if they do not reflect the mirror back to the West, but instead act in their own philosophies, ideologies, etc., then the people in Europe can see, okay, it doesn't have to be this way, like we are right now living and thinking and so on. It can be different. So that's also another part. And the other part is that there simply needs to be an external crisis that affects or will affect the European, or not European, but transatlantic elites. There has to be in some way. In what way, I'm not sure, but I mean, if we think about theoretical construct, this would be the way that there could be change. So, yeah.
Yeah, so you're talking about elite anxiety and how it makes them to wage wars. But have you ever thought that your articles can give people anxiety as well when they read your articles?
Yes. yes. I'm aware that they are quite bleak, maybe hopeless if one reads them like that. That's why in the first part, I think there was at the end of the first part, I actually thought I would make 3 parts, and the third part would be about, let's say, looking at the resistance part of what can be done or what are other countries doing. But of course, then the more I developed these essays, the more material I had. So there will still be a part about this, what I just talked about more or less, but more developed, about exactly what, now that we know all this, is there any way out of this? And it's not that I have the solution, but if we think in just theoretical terms, there is a logic and there is hope. So yeah, these 3 parts definitely are not. If you just read them, you say, "Oh, okay, we are doomed." But no, I don't think I, as the author of the essays, don't think that this is the case.
Yeah, so you end your series by saying that American empire, it has reached its historical conclusion, but it refuses to expire. And then in doing so, it's getting more and more desperate and destructive. So do you still see that happening, given that the new United States national security document has come out?
Yes, yes, because it's again, it's just a moment of recalibration, of restructuring, of taking a pause to build up all these plans that they have to the conclusion that they want to have it, to technologically develop themselves as much as possible, to find a way to industrialize, well, not maybe industrialize, but at least find a way to produce the armament and so on, and also have the military human resources to prepare in, and also the other side of the economic decoupling. So all of this is what this strategy, I would say, reflects, even if many would say, oh, these national security strategies, they don't have much meaning. I would say that it does reflect these other plans, like the strategic foresight analysis, like the Army Unified Network Plan and so on, like the Transformation Command Keystone document and so on. It reflects exactly these ideas, these doctrines, just in other terms that are strategically used, so to create a narrative that will prepare the different populations for the different tasks within these Western sphere, one could say.
Thanks. So to sum up, the first article talks about the psychology of elite and their anxiety. Second part talks about the strategy, which is strategy of ambiguity. And the third part talks about the physical infrastructure and the resources required to carry all that out. Okay. Thanks very much, Nel. I really appreciate you taking the time to explain it to me. Hopefully whoever watches this will benefit from your analysis as well. And you mentioned you will write more articles like this, so those will probably come out next year after Christmas, I guess. I'll
Yes,
keep an eye on your
exactly.
Substack. Yeah. That's. Is there anything else you want to add, or is that all?
No,
We've talked a lot.
thank
Yeah,
you.
we've talked a lot, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks very much, Nel. I will stop recording now.